Prologue. The young wolf looked up sulkily at the moon. It wasn't that elegant silver claw, a sight which had always filled him with hope for the moon-bright hunts of the coming weeks. Nor was it the blinding full moon that cast tree shadows on the snow, sharp enough to count the needles on the pine. This was an unsatisfactory, lumpish moon, like the gnawed skull of a long-dead bison. But still, he felt the desire to howl his hunger and his rage and his frustration into its face. It was a desire he swallowed down. Howling was not for wolves, wandering alone in the world, with neither a pack nor a den for safety. So he snatched and snapped in frustration at the soft snow with his long teeth. 6 hungry months before, he had been forced to leave his birth pack after rashly challenging the Alpha, his father. The Alpha had crushed him like a beetle, and he felt lucky to have escaped with his life. He was chased away by the whole pack, even his brothers and sisters, ripping at his tail and blue-black flanks. Fleeing his own pack, he soon found himself in the territory of others, and this was mortal danger. A lone male like him might be killed on sight, and nothing would be left of him but a smear of blood on the snow. So when he wasn't running, he was hiding, and at the first sign of his own kind, he would swerve away, as if scorched by a forest fire. But as he moved through the hungry days and the famished weeks, he became gradually aware of changes. The first thing he noticed was that the night was no longer filled with the howls of rival packs. The wolves had left these woods, and he trotted more easily through the trees and clearings. And then he noticed that it was not only the wolves that were absent. There was no stink of bear, no sign of lynx. Again, this was a relief. True, only a stupid wolf would allow a bear within paw range, but a lynx would kill a wolf before he knew it was there, and all wolves feared them. As forest predators, and indeed their prey, abandoned the woods, their place was taken by the only other creature that the wolves truly feared. There were roads here, with cars and trucks. There were farms with big dogs. He heard bangs in the woods, and he sensed that this was a sound even more perilous than the chittering hiss of the lynx. There was nothing for a wolf here. The knowledge of this came to him as he reached the brow of a hill and gazed beyond. He couldn't understand what he was looking at. The cranes and rising towers, the concrete bunkers, the steel chimneys, honking trucks with loads of brick and cement, and great lengths of pipes like fallen trees. And everywhere, people, swarming like ants. No, this was no place for a wolf. Better to take his chance back in the old forest, where he understood his enemies and might one day make new friends, new allies. So he turned and trotted back into the darkness. And later, deep in the forest, he came across a small cottage with a garden lit by that uninspiring skull moon. A flickering orange light spilled from the window, but the light didn't interest him. He hadn't eaten anything for 3 days, and even then all he'd had was a hedgehog, hardly worth the noseful of prickles it had cost him. But there was something better than hedgehog. Big birds of a kind he'd never seen before, clucking behind a wire fence. He'd encountered fences on his journey, and found that any fence can be jumped over or dug under. And now he began to dig, as the birds beyond clucked and fluttered in a delicious panic. There was a sound behind him, and he backed quickly out of the shallow tunnel he'd scraped. It was the animals that wolves fear. But this one was small and frail. She stared silently at him, and he stared silently back. She would make a better meal even than the birds, but if she was prey, why wasn't she frightened? Why wasn't she running? What was that fire that burned in her eyes? Why was she now walking towards him, holding out that stick with smaller twigs bristling at the end of it? Still, he could spring and tear out her throat. It would be easy. It was impossible. The machinery and the huge buildings he had seen were beyond his understanding. This creature was not like that. She was of the forest, like him, but she had a power of her own, and it made his hackles rise. He looked again at her, looked again, longingly, at the chickens, and then he turned and ran away into the night. One day he would be back.